Barbara?
Hey there. Um, I'm looking for some guidance on what kind of a daily practice would be good to help me fortify myself against the emotional barrage of the collective. Been in kind of a funk for a week, and um, you've covered so much, and there's bits and pieces in every class, and I'm kind of at a loss of what to pull together that might be a really
Tell
helpful.
tell me what's been going on. Like what are your experiences, or what are the things that you're trying to address? That way I can kind of fine tune it.
Okay. Um, Bouts of sadness
Okay.
that I think are part mine and part not mine.
Okay.
And I had I think 2 weekends ago in a class, time's kind of mushy, but I had this sense of this tapping into this internal unexplicable joy that lasted almost 3 days.
Oh yeah. I remember that. I remember you talking about it, I should say.
Um, and then a few days later I crashed and I'm
Okay.
for a day and a half and I don't feel like I'm really out of it. I keep going back in and out of it. And my sense is that the more work we do and the more things that get cleaned out, maybe there's deeper levels of things that I'm tapping into. But it also feels like there's this increased awareness or sensitivity to both the very good things and the not so good things. And
Yeah,
everything just feels so much more
sure.
palpable, intense, close. And I'm wondering what practices would sort of help me go with that flow and feel a little less labile from swinging from one end to the other. Does that help?
Okay. Yes, yes, yes. Let me
Thank you.
just sit with this for a second.
Mm, I'm aware some of my emotion is personal or interpersonal stuff, but I'm pretty sure that it's not all that. And I don't know if what you would suggest that I do as a practice would differ based on whether it's kind of coming from the collective or whether it's more personal, interpersonal.
And
I'll
so
just start.
when you're dreaming, are you having any sort of imagery or themes or anything going on in your dream time?
Not a lot, and not most of it seems pretty mundane. I haven't had a kind of unusual dream in a while. I do notice though that I often wake up a lot feeling like I was sweating during the night.
Okay.
I'm not aware of having anything that's fearful or scary or but I often wake up feeling as if I've been sweating and my sweat has a different odor to it, if that
Okay.
means anything. But this can happen walking outside on a sunny day and all of a sudden I just like this sadness comes over.
Hmm. Okay. And like when it comes on, how long does it last?
Well, the first time it was a day and a half.
Okay.
Sometimes it's 20, 30, 40 minutes. Sometimes it's an hour or two. It can be, except for that first episode, they're not long, but they come on so quickly and they feel it's really like swinging to the other end of the spectrum from being happy and joyful to just sad.
Okay. Yeah. So there's even like when we talk about trauma or an old hurt feeling or something, there's like levels or degrees. But when I say levels, it's almost like how people go, it's like an onion, there's layers or whatever. That there is, but you know I mean, you're kind of tying into something that we're going to be tying into both the mechanics of light and then the mastery of the elements coming at the end of the middle of the month and the end of the month. And this is why sometimes um different emotions can be harder and harder to manage. And it's not the way that when you say that there's a lot of layers, it's because when we first start looking at something that maybe causes us sadness, so we'll say trauma, hurt feelings, an old event, the lack of something in a situation, because sometimes we're sad that like we don't have a connection with somebody that we really care for or something. You know what I mean? It's not that it was traumatic, it's just sad. It's like, you would like to have a deeper connection or and part of what happens when we start looking at these issues, it kind of ties together with everything that we've been doing over the last 6 months or a year is we do it from the point of view of intellect. And then from intellect, we try to resolve it from the point of view of intellect. And the intellect really just sees through the senses and it sees our experience and it's like, okay, this happened, I don't feel good, I feel sad, I try to resolve it, right? But when we flip it and we look at it from the point of view of intuition, intuition doesn't see the past events the way intellect does, and intuition doesn't really see the senses the way that intellect does, if really even at all. And if you step away from our personal experience and you step in and you go, what is this little thing that I call sadness or hurt feelings or trauma or whatever, and really when you break down the mechanics, we've been doing a lot of it, but I haven't explained a lot of it to the certain extent because even for myself doing therapy over the years, it's like my head will get into it too much, so like I just get in and treat, and so I keep it real simple, like, oh, we're gonna walk our way out of this or that or whatever. But if you look at what is happening, so first, this is going to be a long explanation. Is that okay? Were you just looking for a quick thing, or is it okay if I give you kind of like a layout?
Perfectly fine for
Yeah.
me. I
Okay.
hope it's helpful for others too.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I find it interesting. So, okay. So first, let's just talk about what is a thought form, right? So, I mean, I know I've said this a bunch, but still, I mean, I still think about this all the time. So when we think something repetitively, or we feel something with the emotional body intensely, it begins to attract energy from the environment. Okay, so let's just stop right there. So the feeling something emotional intensely or thinking something repetitively generates what you would call energy of thought, right? Not a thought form, but it's energy of thought, right? It's thought energy that has not come in the form. So if you stop thinking about it, it just kind of floats away, right? If you keep thinking about it, it keeps getting a little denser and a little denser and a little denser, and then eventually it starts to attract the energy from the environments, right? So then the energy that you're attracting from the environments is an element or elementals. And so they're energetic building blocks that help bring things into form. So when you're thinking some good idea, some bad idea, whatever it is, the more that you repetitively think about it, you begin to bring that energy in from the environment, the elements, and it mixes with that thought energy and brings it into form, right? So then when you stop thinking about it, it still exists. Where thought energy, as soon as you stop thinking about it, it's gone, right? But when it becomes a thought form, it has a little bit of consciousness. It's not smart like a person, it's not like a being, it's just this thought form. It's energy with or thought with a little bit of consciousness. So, over the weekend, I think I made the joke where I was like, I'm not going to Starbucks anymore. That's it. I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And 15 minutes later, I was like, a venti, not a grande latte with whip and 2 pumps, not 3 pumps, you're doing the whole thing. So if you decided that, why did that happen? Is you've done it so much that it's created a thought form. And even when you turn your attention away, that thought form still wants to experience what it is, right? So if that thought form is about yummy lattes from Starbucks and you go, I'm not doing this anymore, and you turn your attention away, that thought form is going, we're going to Starbucks, we're going to Starbucks, we're going to get that lot, we're going to Starbucks, right? So, that's in a very light way. But when we have strong emotions or repetitive thoughts, we attract energy from the environment. The energy from the environment, the elements or elementals, mix with the thought energy and create this thought form. So when we have a traumatic event, we generate the thought energy. We have a strong emotion that is usually followed by a repetitive thought. Like you're trying to make sense out of it, you're trying to process it, you're trying to manage it. So you keep thinking about it like, oh boy, what happened? What was this? Oh boy, and then they did this and then they did that. And then I said this. Oh boy, you keep like kind of grinding on it, even if it's unconscious. The elements are associated with the event itself. And so part of what happens is this is why when I say when you have a trauma, there's still a little piece of you stuck in the event, is the thought energy and those elementals kind of fuse to fuse the thought form. You go walking away still generating the thought energy. That event, because of the intensity, has generated some elementals that then you're connected to that external event, right? That's why when you go back and you think of the memory and then you kind of feel the feeling again, or that feeling's just always there causing a little bit of anxiety or tension, and so you have the thing in you and then you have the thing that's external, like the past event. The past event is all the elementals, and it's continually feeding you elementals, even though that event is 20 years ago, right? 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So then you go off and you're doing whatever, you're still being fed those elementals, regardless if you don't think about it, because you had the initial thing happen, right? And so that's why it's like trauma or something still feels like it's happening. And so when we do that practice where we go, okay, how's it feel in your body? And then go to an active situation or go to a past event. Part of what you're doing when you're doing that is by going to the event or the active situation or even the person, you're starting to break down like that bundle of elementals. You're starting to break down that it keeps feeding you, even though that event was 20 years ago. So the more that you keep doing that, the more it starts to break it down. And so then what starts to happen is the thought energy starts coming to the surface. It comes out of the body, comes out of the chakras, and is starting to surface in the aura, and then it can be flushed out of the aura, right? So the way that is amplified is when we do the thing where we breathe the essence in and we breathe through the past event or the active situation. Literally what you're doing is you're breaking down that thought energy and you're breaking down those elementals. And without doing that, you go through, you release trauma, you get it feeling okay, so that maybe it's not at least in your active mind. But all you're really doing is you're trying to entangle to the point where you can do this back and forth with the situation, right? because like when you're super entangled, going back and forth like that, it's either not going to happen, it's not going to go well, or you're going to get a little bit re-triggered a little bit. Usually it just doesn't happen, right? And so when when you have something that arises in the mind, feel it in the body, right? And then go to the situation. And at first you can just observe it, because obs excuse me, observation starts to stimulate intuition. You're moving out of the intellect. The intellect always feels like it has to make something happen in this situation, when really all that needs to happen is you just need to disentangle the thought energy and the elementals. Then whatever that is, just kind of, the polite way to say it is it goes to the light, but that thought form basically dies. It ceases to be, right? And so when you have this, I mean, given your practice with your Buddhist practices and everything, this might not even be about now. Like you're tapping into intuition, you might start being aware of things that were not of this life. And so there can be sadnesses for things that just there's no reference for. But still, the way to unwind it is just to like look at your experiences that are going on or from the past, and then you kind of repeat the process. And so even the idea of using the oils, like the Cape chamomile is very good for breaking up the elementals. And then the thought energy you can use, like ginger lily. That's why ginger lily works so good for this. You can use ginger lily, you can use acacia, you can use that pepo, you can use helichrysum, and you're unwinding mm, the thought energy here, but then you're unwinding the elementals, and it just basically dissipates. Then it's just in your aura, like you almost have reversed the process. So at first it hit your aura and then physicalized. So now that you've deconstructed it, it's come out of the chakras and now it's in the aura, right? So then from the aura, then you just go through and like you clean up the aura, right? You could still use the helichrysum or the impepo or the ginger lily, or you can start to do some of the auric practices that we're doing. But that's part of what we're gearing up for, is being able to flush things out, but also being able to amplify the things we want to come in, right? If we want healthy respiratory system, you can set a program in the aura and have it physicalize, just like a trauma sets a program in the aura and begins it to physicalize. So you get it to that point where you can get it out to the aura, and then you just do those 4 quadrants like we've been doing, and you flush it out of the system. So for sadness, I mean, I would still, ginger lily would still probably work. You know what else might work? Marjoram. Just good old fashioned marjoram, like going on the 4 quadrants of the body. But the back and forth, I mean, there's several things that you could probably use, but like when I do my personal like little version of that, I do it with my dorje and a purba. Like, I take the purba like so, and I'll visualize the thing. I'll do the back and forth where I breathe in the essence and I breathe through the situation. And after I get to the point where I don't feel like I can do it anymore, I keep visualizing it, and then I just start poking the situation. Like, because if you could see clairvoyantly, like you can almost see like there's this light and then there's this like little dark ball that you're breaking up. When you're breathing the essence in and breathing through something, you keep breaking down that dark, it's just a bundle of elementals is all it is. It's just a little, like it looks like a beehive or a wasp's nest or something. It has like all these little things flying off of it, but there's this piece that's just really, really dense. And when I talk about like that you walk away from it, is like you're breaking that up and you're just literally like walking away, where there's like, okay, no strings attached to that situation anymore. Because that's the thing, is these situations, our intellect deals with the senses. So the intellect goes, that happened 20 years ago. To the intuition, it's like it's still there because it's still connected. Like it's beyond the senses. So the intuitional mind still is going, no, that is still happening. Like that is, we are still connected to that bundle of elementals that keeps feeding us and makes us feel this way. Because elementals will affect behavior, it will affect how you think, how you feel, emotions, it will affect anxiety, I mean, it just causes all kinds of things. And so sadness being one, anger being another. And um if you wanted to be like really thorough about how you broke it down, like how you break it down, um we're actually going to do it in the weekend class, the foundational for mystical healing. But I'll tell you like that part. And it's to take the seven colors, so you start with violet, then you go green, then you go blue, then you go orange and red, then gold, and then sacred blue. And each one you do the four quadrants, four quadrants, four quadrants, four quadrants. And after you've done what we first talked about, and that flushes all that stuff out of your your aura. Regardless, if how we did the generational healing, where we did the structure, we did the function, we did the dynamic activity of the aura. This is a different aspect of the aura that I haven't talked about yet, but it's basically tied to especially instinctive and emotional components, and then your immunity. So it directly dictates on like how you interact with the external environment, especially that first interaction, right? So like if somebody's a jerk or somebody's being difficult, your energy body has a reaction, but the first thing in your physiology that steps up and goes, that guy's a jerk and needs to stay away from me, it's your immune system, right? So the colored energies, like the gold healer and the blue healer and the red healer, they're all for fortifying. Any of the colored pranas are strongly fortifying to the mm, uh, immunity, the immune system. And not just your physical immunity, but also like the part of the immunity that impacts your psychological makeup, and then also the thing that even allows for like a deeper level of connection in spiritual practice. And so by going through and doing this, you can also add taking the Melissa internally and everything. But the component of doing the back and forth and then flushing it out of the aura usually will not just flesh out the things that you're talking about, but when these events happen that actually cause or generate these kinds of responses, because of what you've done to the aura and how you've unwound some of these things, but especially the aura, the level of emotional intensity or repetitive thinking actually is diminished, and so you have diminished the potential of generating a traumatic thought. And so it's not even just about, oh, I want to calm this down, I want to soothe this, but it's like, I want this to stop happening. Like this needs to not be a thing, right? So the more that you do this, like at first some things will probably come to the surface. Like I found that stuff would come up and I could feel them in my energy body, but I might have a dream or two with it, but it wasn't like I was feeling anything about a situation. But there's times where you go, oh, I feel a little sad, or I feel a little bit, whatever. It's usually either sadness or anger. but then it will pass very quickly. Right? The more you do this, the more that it passes quicker and quicker. And um, basically you're refining the energy body to go beyond like the production of gold in the energy body, but you're starting to develop what they call in your practice would be like the diamond body or a rainbow body. And part of what that is the a level or degree of non-reactiveness. You know, the diamond body is like you're so protected and you're so insulated that you start to be non-reactive to everything going on. So even when a traumatic event happens, it's like, yes, this sucks, but it's not freaking me out, right? Where before, it's like the more that you get upset or get really repetitive thinking about it, you just keep generating stuff that hits the aura and then just keeps going deeper and deeper into the chakras. And so we just keep repeating it. And so this is a way to unwind all of that, but then to stop. I shouldn't say stop, but to minimize the potential for it to keep happening or to happen again. You know, so like you'll notice, we were just talking about this like a day or two ago. I can't even remember now, but where something might be like upsetting for like a couple of days, where now it might be like 45 minutes, you know, versus, you know, it used to be a day or two to shake something off. Now it's like, well, that's pretty upsetting. And then 45 minutes later, you're like, okay, I'm kind of done. You know, the goal would be to be able to do that in 5 minutes, you know, if you're the Dalai Lama or you know, somebody like that. But the more that you do the practice of going to the situation, coming back, you're diminishing the tendency to have that happen, but you're unwinding those past events. You're unwinding the influence that those things have. So a lot of times we think of trauma being inside us, which there is a piece, but a lot of it is actually still outside us that we keep drawing in. Right. And so even when we're doing the materialization breaths and things, that's part of what we're doing is we're diminishing that potential for us to be drawing that in. We're changing how the mind works and how the emotions work so that we don't keep drawing that in. And so at some point, you know, even going internal, you work sadness or you work trauma or, you know, whatever it might be, you get to a certain point and then you're like, God, I feel like I hit a blockage. It's not that you've hit a blockage. You're literally going the wrong direction because you're going in. And sometimes you have to actually go out. Like you have to go out and like, okay, let's break up these traumatic events. And so even like in the Buddhist tradition where they do the thing with the dorje or the Egyptian tradition where they're doing a thing with an ankh, part of what they're doing is that's what they're doing is they're breaking up those pieces, right? They're breaking up those pieces so that things can flush out of you, come to the aura, and then the practice flushes them out. And doesn't she have that sword? The same sword like I do. Like you know that sword that you have, that Manjushri sword?
I do.
You can sit and point it like you sit and visualize your like you could do it with the oils, but then you go, okay, even if you think it has nothing to do with this situation, you just want to unwind these things from the past. Like, you know what is a big one for me? High school. Like, it's not even like a traumatic thing. I just sat and do high school. All kinds of crap comes out of me. Like things it's not even that I like have memories. It's just like trauma, awkward feelings, just weird stresses. It's just a bunch of weird stuff comes out. That was like 40 years ago. Like, you know, that was like ages ago, still in there. But it's because I'm still have some sort of connection to this past. So you sit and connect, and then even just take the sword and just point it forward as you hold that image in your mind, and then start. You can chant just Om Mani Padme Hum, or if you have a mantra that you really like, something that's purifying. The one that I like to use is the one for Mahakala. but you know, to whatever is the one in your practice.
Yeah,
And
no, I like
so,
that one too.
yeah, like I really like that mantra. Um, do that for a while, and at first it'll feel like, I don't know if anything happened. Like, yeah, eh, okay. And then you'll notice like you start doing things throughout the day and you're just like bopping around and your mind is working different. You have more energy, you're more animated. And then you're like, ah, guess I do feel better.
Mm.
You know, but in the moment, because you don't have anything to measure it against. So you just go, well, I think I feel the same, but it's because of the interactions is what we're feeling. So you don't really know it until you start interacting with things outside yourself to be able to measure it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Like let's maybe just run through a little practice right now.
Yeah,
Does that sound good?
sounds great.
Can I ask a couple more questions
Yeah, of
first?
course.
So the logical mind, I don't know that it's pushing back, but it's saying, well, um, this doesn't feel like trauma. Does it matter what the emotion is? It might
No,
be more
nuh-uh.
confusion or
Could be anger, could be anxiety, could be confusion, like you said, could be trauma, could be fear, could be stresses. There's different kinds of stresses. Sometimes it's like even projections from other people, psychic attacky kind of stuff, but it still was traumatizing to you. I was just having a discussion with a practitioner from a different tradition, and we were talking about one time I was fine, my blood pressure was fine, everything was fine, and then all of a sudden my blood pressure just went through the roof. And I was like, God, I'm now worked up, I'm not stressed, everything's fine, like I'm doing all my practices, and then it went away. And then a few months went by and then it happened again. And I was like, God, what is this? Like, what is it? And I found out after the fact that there was a large group of people who were super pissed at me exactly at the same time. Hard to say, but you know, when they calmed down, my blood pressure went down. It wasn't that I was thinking about it. It wasn't that I didn't even know about it. I mean, I haven't talked to these people in probably 10 years, 8 years, something like that. And, who knows what they got all worked up about, but I just kind of heard through the grapevine and I was like, what did I do? And they were like, yeah, your name came up and people started grinding on it. And that's not even something that happened. That was something that was active that I was completely unaware about, but it still impacted my physiology, you know? And so, uh, sometimes we're going to be aware of the things and sometimes we have no clue. Like it might be people projecting things to you that, in that particular case, it was projected at me to the point where it was actually traumatizing to the body, but I was unaware of it. And then sometimes things from past lives come through. I would say for the average person, that doesn't happen a lot unless a seed pops in their life, which usually doesn't start happening until like their 40s or 50s. But it's usually in their 40s, just because of karmic cycles and things or planetary cycles. It can happen at any time, but the potential is always 42 to 49. And so you just put in the good mechanics, the thing of like doing all the stuff that we're doing. You just keep doing that to unwind all of that and to prevent it. And um, going back to that situation that happened to me a few years ago, and I stepped up my protection practices and I did more work of what we're talking about, very specific to these groups of people. And again, I had no feelings about any of it. Like it wasn't like I was upset or hurt or whatever, but there's just times where I would feel these weird tensions. All of that's gone now. Like I've even heard of one time where they got super pissed at me again for some reason. And I don't have interactions with them, so it's mind boggling to me. But And this time nothing happened to the blood pressure, nothing happened. But like I was a bit more active with all the practices. And so
That's helpful.
the intellect, I'll just say it like this: like as much as I sit and think about it, it's really hard for the intellect to grasp it. Like it almost doesn't make sense to the intellect. Because there's nothing visual, there's nothing physical that you can latch onto. But like when I see the imagery, it just looks like a swarm of mosquitoes or a swarm of bugs or something that are just dense, that it's like there's just little pieces just constantly coming to a person. And the more that you break that stuff up, the more that the person can process. Because here's a thing that will like kind of, I don't think I've ever mentioned this. You know how like in certain spiritual practices you practice the disintegration of like pride and arrogance and conceit and self-inflation and all of that. Well, if you've ever spent time doing it with oils and with your purba and your dorje and all these things, you notice it's like, well, it's there, but like it gets a little better, but it doesn't really shift or change any very much. Most of the building blocks for the pride and the arrogance is not in you. It's you gather the pieces outside and then you bring it in and you build it.
Hmm.
So why try to break it down here? Break it down out there. Like don't even let the building blocks in. Like if you get that part of the practice down, it's a game changer. And if you look at some of the anointing oils, like in that Jewish tradition, the Ketoret and some variations of Ketoret, that's what they're all for. They're not for breaking it down in you. They're about breaking down the building blocks to like the negative forms of pride that are external. It's like they try to not allow it to come in, if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, last thing,
That's why pride is so hard to treat. And pride, if you think about it, pride is a big stumbling block to healing, but it's not what's in the person, it's what the person's connected to. Like, so sometimes to actually heal, like when somebody has PTSD, to actually heal the PTSD, you go through, you unwind things, you do the things that you do, but until you disconnect them from that external source, they're always going to be triggered.
hmm,
Yeah.
the logical mind is asking, how do I downplay the role that I am playing in terms of the repetitive thoughts and the intense emotions?
I
Is
would
that
I
going
would
to defeat
say
the practice? How do I let that piece
no.
go?
Actually, I find that doing the work with the external parts and then coming back to the body will actually quiet all of that down. Like the repetitive thought is the intellect trying to process what it's connected to, but it doesn't have the perception of what it's connected to, if that makes sense. Like it's trying to process it, but it doesn't, it's like trying to process, like you got a gift in the mail and then you go, okay, close your eyes now, unwrap it and try to figure out what it is. Like, okay, what is it? Is it it's this, it's that, and you're feeling around, you go, well, it's a weird shaped, it's this, it's that, it feels like a pear, but it's metal, and you're going through all the stuff. It's your intellect just trying to process and figure out what it is, right?
Kind of like trying to make meaning out of something.
You're right. And so
Okay.
the more that you unwind the external part, the inner part, you're already really pretty wired for it. It's like if you were fed like dirty, yucky water and you always had like, upset stomach. It's like you can treat the upset stomach or you can stop drinking the yucky water. you know, you might need to treat the stomach real quickly, but really the goal is stop drinking the yucky water.
Right.
You know, and it basically it's the same idea. Like if you can calm down the things externally, then the internal part, you know, you still might have a little bit or something, but it becomes much easier to treat. Like much easier to treat. But you know, the reason, for one, this is a super abstract idea, like super abstract. And if people haven't done some level or degree of unwinding, like the traumas, the stresses, the lower emotions, the thought processes, the blockages and whatever, if you just jump in and start doing this without having any sort of foundation, it still works. It's just um it's just a lot. Like the person can usually process it. It's just it can be a little bit overwhelming, and it goes a little slower. But if you kind of like how we've been stepping up to it and doing bit by bit by bit, so by the time you get in and start doing it, it just flushes out of you. It just, you know, so you still start with internal and you just kind of walk your way out, and then you start walking your way back in, then working them back and forth. And it's like you still remember those events, but like for me, I go back and I remember the events. I can't even remember the details, where when something very traumatic happened, like I can remember all the details like it happened yesterday. And then you do this practice and then you're like, you know, there was that thing. You notice that your mind can't lock into it. And to take this a step further, you know, because we're talking about the external thing is not so much the thought forms or the person or what happened. It's like you're targeting that bundle of elementals. Right? In the Catholic tradition, when they do an like an exorcism, you know, you have to be very careful about like how they do the process, because you know if you rush into it, it can be very hard on the body or the person doing it. But what they're exercising is not some big demon, it's elementals. It is cockroaches. It's just a cockroach infestation. And the reason, you know, they don't have the same terminology or have the same degree of understanding of the energetics and the mechanics of the situation, but why they have to be so careful is they're purifying and trying to release these things, but without disconnecting. Like without the disconnection, all you do is you go and stick a stick in a hornet's nest. What do? You get a bunch of pissed off hornets coming after you, right? It's the same thing. You get a bunch of pissed off elementals coming at you, trying to maintain that food source that they've been feeding off of all that time. And so you kind of go through and you unwind it. And then at some point, just the back and forth is like the disconnect. But then we go through and we clean cords, and we do a lot of safety measures to really make sure that this is all going to unwind very properly. So even if it comes out a little bit uncomfortable, had we not done it, it probably would be 5 or 10 times more uncomfortable. So you go through and you unwind it. And then when the time comes, you just go, no, just get out of here, go.
Thank you for this. I really appreciate you taking
Yeah.
the time to go through it.
Yeah.
Super helpful.
It's a super interesting topic, but um you know, the only reason that I haven't been talking about it like, you know, in the last year or two or whatever is it's so abstract that like I just felt we needed to have a little bit more base on some of the things before we get into the really abstract things, because we're stepping away from what mainstream thought processes are. But even in new agey or holistic circles, they still kind of a lot of times just do like a version of what mainstream medicine or psychology does. They just try to do it like in a holistic way or a natural way or something. And they're still coming at it from the point of view of intellect. You know, that's the thing with intellect, is that for like you see like really traumatic cases, when people go at it from the point of view of intellect, they'll even get some relief for a while. And then time goes by, and then either a different aspect comes up or they feel worse. And part of it is because the intellect feels like it needs to make something happen, when really it's just about unwinding, like disconnecting, detaching, whatever you want to call it. And so even the idea or the use of like sage, part of why sage is used in so many ceremonies, and you cleaning space, and if something's going on, somebody burns a bundle of sage, is sage is about detachment, like detaching from those kinds of things. And it doesn't always do it all at once, but you keep working the sage, you keep working the sage, you keep working the sage, and it will just keep diminishing. So at some point you can just go, I'm done. So like even the idea of cleaning cords, sometimes we're cleaning cords to people, but a lot of times when I have you guys like focus on the person, focus on the past event, focus on the active situation. Part of what you're doing is you're cleaning up the elementals in that situation so that it diminishes, and allows for that like disentangling to happen, so that at some point it gets weak enough to where you can just go, or in a meditation or another oil process or in a salt bath or something, where it just goes, okay, we're done. We're just done. And so my guess is that there's some situations where you are feeling sadness, and some of it is not always your it could be like the news, it could be things going on around you, but it still was upsetting. Like I would say things that were upsetting, but you know how like sometimes when something happens and it's like a little traumatic or really displaces you somewhat, it's not even like that you get upset or get hurt or something. You know how like when you just like, well, you get that little bit of shock, like, oh, and you're trying to process like what just happened. Like those are things like you might not be able to remember them all, but just those times where you're like, I got this phone call, and there was no argument or something, but something big happened, something shifted you, something, something was going on. Could be that somebody calls you and tells you somebody passed, or we have to let you go at work, or some big thing. And it might not register as like, oh, I'm super upset about this, but you going into shock means that it rocked you, and that there's a piece, uh, thought energy stuck in that situation, and elementals that are like starting to come to you now because it was of such intensity, if that makes sense. So I guess what I'm trying to say there is like, it might not have anything to you personal to you, but like you open up the paper one day and you see something super shocking that it really kind of upsets you a little bit, and then 15 minutes later you moved on. There was a connection, like there's an elemental connection, so that it's still going to be going in your mind. It's still going to start affecting your emotions, your instinctive responses. It's those building blocks have come in, and now your energy body is starting to do something with them. Do we lose it?
No, she's here.
Okay.
I didn't know if you were
Yeah,
responding.
no, I'm just yeah. But is that clear enough for like a practice, or you want me to like lay it out a little bit? Like I can write it out for you if you'd like.
I think I could. Will play with it a little bit and get back to you if I have any
And then let me
questions.
know how it does, and break out that old sword.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
And then